Hello, welcome to KO with Kyle. I'm your host, Kyle. Tonight's episode, we're going to be forecasting for the upcoming UFC event on August 8th. It's a fight night between Oleinik and Derrick Lewis. We're going to be talking about all the matchups on the main card, any possible bets to make. And since we are a new channel, if you're following us on YouTube, be sure to subscribe and hit the like button for the algorithm. And we appreciate that very much. Now, without any further ado, let's get into the episode. Alright, kicking off the main card at the August 8th fight night, we have Beneil Dariush, ranked number 14 at lightweight, versus Scott Holtzman, who's currently unranked but doing pretty good for himself. Has put on a recent win streak. He's 4 of his last 5. His only loss recently coming as a unanimous decision against Nick Lentz. But Beneil Dariush is always a really exciting fighter. He's an Iranian Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu master, and he has a lot of exciting finishes by KO and by different kinds of submission. He's on a 4-fight win streak, Dariush, and 3 of them were performance of the night. 2 KOs and 1 submission, or 1 KO and 2 submissions. And then Dariush's only notable losses really were against Edson Barbosa and Michael Chiesa, who were really tough customers, and then Alexander Hernandez, he lost in a KO. If he didn't have those losses, he'd probably be ranked a lot higher. I think he ought to be ranked higher than 14. He's always putting on a really good performance. Really exciting fighter. Holtzman was a former XFC lightweight champ. He's coming off of a fight night unanimous decision win against Jim Miller. And Holtzman has some exciting wins by TKO, doctor stoppage, and KO with elbows. UFC fight math doesn't always work out, but Beneil Dariush submitted Drew Dober, and Holtzman lost to Drew Dober in a decision. So who knows if that'll mean anything for this fight. The Vegas odds have Dariush as the favorite, and I also think that it's a safe bet. If I was going to bet on this fight, it would be Dariush. So moving on. The next fight on the card is going to be the female fight at bantamweight between Yana Kunitskaya and Julia Stoliarenko. And this fight is interesting because Kunitskaya is coming in as the favorite, although she's coming off of a TKO loss against Aspen Ladd. And Stoliarenko really doesn't have too many fights in the UFC. She was on the Ultimate Fighter Heavy Hitters season, where there was a female featherweight contenders on the season, and she was one of them, fighting at 145 at that time. She got 1 win on the Heavy Hitters season, and then got a loss, and then lost again to someone else in the finale. But this is her first fight back to the UFC. Stoliarenko is actually the current bantamweight Invicta champ, which doesn't mean as much because a lot of the fighters are over in UFC at this point, but still is worth something to note. Kunitskaya, previous to her loss to Aspen Ladd, her first fight, she also came out at 145 at featherweight against Chris Cyborg and lost in a TKO, I believe, in the first round. But subsequently, or following that, she moved down to bantamweight and had some success. Unanimous decision wins against Lena Landsberg and then Marion Renault before her loss against Aspen Ladd. So they both fought at featherweight before. They both moved down. We'll see if this is the right weight class for them. I think it probably is. I think Cyborg mentioned on Twitter that there is no 145 female weight class in the UFC 4 video game. So maybe they're signaling that they're not really invested in this weight class anymore without Cyborg in it. So who's to say? But Kunitskaya herself was also a former Invicta bantamweight champ and a former Russian Taekwondo and Muay Thai champ. So I looked at the Vegas odds to see if there was an over in this fight. That's what I would probably pick, just that it would go to decision, but I didn't see that option available. In that case, I would probably bet on the favorite in this one, minus 220 favorite in Yana Kunitskaya, just because she has a little bit more experience, and being a Taekwondo and Muay Thai champ, I just think she has what it takes to win on the judges' scorecard. Maybe get a finish. So moving on, at middleweight, it's Darren the Dentist Stewart coming in against the Hawaiian Maki Coconut Bombs Pitolo. And Stewart is a British-born fighter who's mostly been on the UK cards that they put on. He's coming off of a loss in a unanimous decision. It was kind of a strange one. It was in Cage Warriors, but it was deemed a UFC bout against Bartez Fabinski. He lost that one in decision. Before that, Stewart had a couple wins against Darren Wynn and against Bevan Lewis, and a split decision loss against Edmund Shabazian. So it was actually kind of a close fight. But Stewart has struggled a little bit against wrestlers. Pitolo is not particularly a wrestler. He's a striker. He goes for KOs. And Stewart has one fight of the night, one performance of the night. His nickname is the Dentist because he said his opponent is just another patient who's going to get drilled, which I thought was pretty funny. And Maki Pitolo, Coconut Bombs, in his Contender Series win was a KO. It was an instance where all 5 winners got signed UFC contracts that night, so that's pretty interesting. I don't think that had ever happened before that. His Pitolo's 13-5 going in as the underdog with a few fights in the UFC. So originally I thought as an underdog this was a pretty good bet for Pitolo, but when I look at Darren Stewart, I always go at the guys who look physically just ripped. Their physique is on point for their weight class, and I think he's really going to put on a show. I think this one has potential to be fight of the night. I think it'll be on the feet. We'll see if Maki Pitolo ends up getting a KO. That'd be a huge win for him, and then he'd probably get a big fight after this. So this is one of those instances where either guy who wins is going to get a pretty good fight. Could go to decision, but I would bet on Darren Stewart to win this one would be my pick. Moving on to the co-main event, it's at middleweight. It is Omari Akhmedov versus Chris Weidman. Chris Weidman being the former middleweight champ. I mean, not that many years ago, only about 3 years ago, he was still the middleweight champ. And he had held the belt for 2.5 years and in 3 title defenses and famous fights against Anderson Silva and his 2 wins against him. So Chris Weidman has everything it takes. He's fought the much bigger names, but his record as of late is not looking so good. Omari Akhmedov is coming off of a win, a unanimous decision victory against Ian Heinisch. And Ian Heinisch is a tough customer, so he's kind of a gatekeeper, whatever you want to say. A guy that if you beat him, you're set up for a next big fight. So that's what happened with Akhmedov. After he beat Heinisch, he got Chris Weidman, who's a big name, being a former middleweight champ, even though he's not currently ranked at middleweight. I believe Weidman is the slight favorite at this point in time. But Akhmedov himself has had 2 fight of the nights, one in his debut, and then after that he moved down to middleweight. But he's 4 for his last 5. The only one he didn't win was a majority draw against Marvin Vettori. But they're all decisions. His 5 for his last 5 have all been decisions, 1 draw and 4 wins. Chris Weidman, on the other hand, is 1 for his last 5. He's honestly 1 for his last 6. But over the span of the last 4 years, he's just had a tough go of it. He went up to light heavyweight to fight Dominic Reyes in 2019. He was kind of dealt with rather quickly in that one. He had lost previous to that in 2018 against Jacare Souza. He got KO'd. His one win was against Kelvin Gastelum, who's a tough customer. He had a heck of a fight against Israel Adesanya, so Weidman and Gastelum both honestly have got a couple of losses on their record lately, but Weidman got the victory with a submission armbar triangle when he beat Gastelum. Before that, he lost to Gegard Musashi and lost to Yoel Romero, so he's got a higher ceiling. He's fought the top names. He's lost to a lot of the top names as of late. We'll see if his heart's really in it. I believed he moved up to light heavyweight because he said due to medical conditions, the cut in weight down to middleweight was tough for him. But he's back at middleweight. Maybe there were just better matchups, and we'll see. Akhmedov is a Dagestani combat sambo champ who was on a 12-1 streak before he even came to the UFC. Wins against Abdul Razak Alhazan, Tim Bosch, and Zach Cummings, and most recently Ian Heinisch. So this one is so close, I wouldn't be comfortable betting on it. I would say Akhmedov, probably just because he's 4 for his last 5, and Weidman is 1 for his last 5. So based on that, I would have to go with the guy who's more on a streak. On the one side, Akhmedov, the last 5 fights have all gone to a decision. On the other side, Weidman's wins and losses have all been finishes. So exciting fights one way or the other, whether he gets completely stopped or he submits someone. We've seen it all from Weidman before. He's broken a leg, he's knocked people out, he's submitted. So should be a really good fight at middleweight. And one of these guys is going to get moved up in the rankings. The other one will be settled somewhere in there as well. Weidman should get a ranking if he's going to continue to fight at middleweight, depending on his performance. I'm sure he'll probably do pretty well against Akhmedov, but I give Akhmedov the slight edge in this one. And moving on to the main event, it is the Black Beast, Derrick Lewis, coming in as the favorite, ranked to number 4 in the heavyweight division, versus number 10 ranked Ukrainian-born, the Russian Oleinik, the boa constrictor, who is 43 years old going into this fight. And both these guys are not spring chickens. They've been doing it for a long, long time. Oleinik's first professional fight was in 97. He's fought in M1, Global, and Pro FC, Bellator, and some pit fighting, and all sorts of different promotions. And he has wins spanning 4 decades. He has a win in the 90s, 2000s, 2010s, and in the 2020s already. That win would be his most recent against Fabricio Verdum. He's coming off of a split decision victory, and he looked pretty good in that fight. It was up close, pressuring Verdum, taking shots and the damage that Verdum put on, wrestling and getting to the ground, avoiding the submissions, the armbar submission from Verdum that he's so deadly with, his ground game. And Oleinik ended up getting the decision in that one. So that's why he got set up with this fight. It's a big fight for him against the number 4 ranked Derrick Lewis, who himself is coming off of a unanimous decision win against Ilir Latifi. And if you rewatch the fight, I'm not really sure Derrick Lewis won that fight. It all depends on how much you score takedowns, because he did get taken down several times and got tripped. So he got tossed, tripped, taken down. The exchanges on the feet were tentative. It looked like Derrick Lewis would knock him out at any moment. Latifi was avoiding him, but for the most part, he was able to grapple with Lewis pretty well and take him down a couple times, but the judges decided it was Lewis who got the win on that one. Prior to that, Lewis also got a split decision victory against Blagoy Ivanov. That one was a back and forth. Blagoy, tough guy, very durable, took a lot of damage. Oleinik, prior to his victory against Verdum, he also got a victory against Maurice Green. He submitted him with an armbar. And then both guys, their story is 2 wins. Most recently, prior to that, 2 losses. So Lewis only has a few losses in his UFC career to Mark Hunt, to Daniel Cormier, Junior Dos Santos, and earlier Matt Mitrione. So, I mean, really tough guys. And Oleinik has his losses were by KO and TKO against Walt Harris and Alistair Overeem. So that spells a little trouble against Lewis, knowing that strikers and guys who pressure and come forward have been known to KO Oleinik. Derrick Lewis is going to be the much bigger guy, although Oleinik handled Verdum pretty well being the smaller guy. I'm not sure he's going to be able to out-wrestle Derrick Lewis. Derrick Lewis just has a plodding, stalking kind of a style. He moves forward. He just wants to get in that close phone booth range and then throw haymakers and try to finish the fight with every punch. He gets you against the cage, and that's when you don't have many options, and that's when he really lets loose. And in his last fight, Derrick Lewis was employing some left high kicks to the head, so that was pretty exciting. It was a new strike from him. We'll see if he does that against Oleinik, or if he's too afraid to throw the kick because he's trying to avoid the wrestling and grappling of Oleinik. Could be also the case. But Oleinik is a submission specialist. He's the only one to finish with the Ezekiel choke twice, I believe, maybe 3 times. And he's choked out a striker in Mark Hunt, but he also got KO'd by Harris and Overeem. So the odds makers have Derrick Lewis as the favorite. I also think Derrick Lewis is the favorite in this one. I wouldn't bet on the over in terms of rounds. I think this one will end relatively quick. I think if Oleinik tries to do the forward pressuring, dirty boxing he tried to do against Verdum, he's not going to be doing well in the exchanges against Derrick Lewis. So if he can get it to the ground, and Derrick Lewis doesn't have the best takedown defense in his previous fights, but probably the best wrestler he fought since Daniel Cormier was when he fought Ilir Latifi, and Latifi did take him down several times. So I'm not sure Oleinik will be able to have as much success. I'm sure that'll be his game plan. I'm sure he doesn't want to trade on the feet, although he also believes himself to be more durable, probably to take it into deeper waters, to be more endurant. And so if he can drag it to the ground, if he can drag it to the later rounds, I think Oleinik has a chance. I originally thought as an underdog there's a pretty good bet on Oleinik just because he was coming off of a win against a big name, and Derrick Lewis hasn't looked the best in his wins and his losses. He's won decisions that looked like he lost. He's barely won fights at the very last second with a KO. He's had some tough losses by KO and getting submitted by Cormier. So it just depends on what Derrick Lewis shows up. I always bet against Derrick Lewis in a sense because of the Francis Ngannou fight, but it's really not fair at this point. He's had at least 5 fights since then where he's actually come forward and thrown shots and didn't just stand there and shadow box and do nothing for 3 straight rounds, which he did against Ngannou. It's just a fight that nobody can forget because it's one of the worst in heavyweight history. But I don't believe this one will be as boring. I think Oleinik will come forward. I think he'll exchange with Lewis. I think he'll try to resort to switching levels and going to his wrestling. I think Lewis, for the most part, will be able to avoid the takedown, and I have Lewis finishing. So let's move on to the picks. Kyle's fight picks. Alright, finishing up with Kyle's fight picks. Just going quickly over the main card, the lightweight bout between Dariush and Holtzman. I have Dariush. The bantamweight between Kunitskaya and Stoliarenko. I have Kunitskaya by decision. The middleweight between Darren Stewart and Maki Pitolo. I have Darren Stewart. The middleweight bout between Omari Akhmedov and Chris Weidman. I think it's too close to make a bet on. I personally wouldn't bet on this fight. Odds are too close. And in the main event, Derrick Lewis versus Oleinik. I think Derrick Lewis by finish. Alright, fight fans, that concludes this episode. We will be back for a recap episode following the UFC fight night. So thank you so much for listening. Hit the subscribe button, share, follow, like us on YouTube, and we appreciate your support. Catch you next time. Peace.